Hi, Andy XL, back with another NFXL podcast and flipping from my state of the franchise addresses, which I've been going through for all 32 teams. We're in the middle, we're on day one of the NFL Combine now. So I did a preview of day one yesterday. I'm now going to put out my preview of day two, which will be where we see the tight end, safeties, and cornerbacks go through their evaluation day, as it were. So I'll have a look at those three positions here. And they start with the tight ends. In truth, we've only got Kenyon Sadiq as the only round one prospect in this class. Then we could see two or three go in the middle part of day two, and another one or two at the end of day two. And then we've got some others that have been on the up recently, and I'll go through them as we see. But Justin Jolie and Sam Roosh have been the ones on the up. Tanner Koziol is a favourite of mine who's lower down the pecking order at the moment, but I think he could be one that surprises a few this year. Maybe he's this year's a Rondé Gadsden. Right, so tight end. What I'll do is I'll just list, I've got my top 20 here who are all in the sort of area of being in the top 250 of my overall big board. So what I'll do is I'll tell you where they are in the tight end rankings, which is just basically going to be the order they're listed in, and then where they sit on my big board. So let's go through the list. My first tight end is Kenyon Sadiq, as I said, out of Oregon. He's 17 on my big board. Then towards the end of round two, the second tight end, Eli Stowers of Vanderbilt, is at 59, and Michael Trigg of Baylor is at 63. The fourth tight end is Max Clare of Ohio State, who's at 76. So he's in competition with those other two to be the second tight end taken. Then we've got, as I say, Justin Jolie, who's on the rise. He's my tight end 5 now, and 104 on my big board out of NC State. Texas Longhorn Jake Andrews is at 6 in my tight end rankings, 105 on my big board. The seventh tight end is Joe Royer from Cincinnati, who's 129 on my big board. Then Stanford Sam Roosh, as I say, who's on the rise, 143 on my big board and up to being the eighth ranked tight end. Eli Raridon of Notre Dame is another who's been rising a little bit recently. He's ninth now in my tight end rankings, 145 on the big board. Similar remarks could apply to Nate Burkirker, who's the 10th tight end out of Texas A&M, 149 on my big board. Alabama's Josh Cuevas is tight end 11 and 158. Lance Mason is 12th at tight end from Wisconsin, 161 on the big board. Oscar Delp of Georgia, 165 on the big board. Dallin Bentley, Utah at 176. Then Kozio is at 199 on my big board. Like I say, I don't want to go into it too much of the science about how I end up with these rankings, but they sort of incorporate my own thoughts plus what I read about the general buzz as to where people might go. And like I say, Koziel seems to be down the list a bit, but I don't think he should be. He's my 15th tight end on this list. I probably would have him in the top 10. So, like I say, he's 199 on my big board. Miles Kitzelman is 208 out of Tennessee. Uh, Daquan Wright, 219 from Old Miss. Luke McCray of USC is at 220. Marlon Klein of Michigan is at 227. And finally, the 20th tight end is Riley Novakoski of Indiana, 253 on my big board. So up to 20 tight ends I've got there, plenty for people to look at and how they perform. Let's see how they perform in the combine to see whether they can move up or down those rankings, which I'll come back and update in maybe couple of weeks. Right, let's go down to safeties then, scrolling down through all my positions here, so bear with me. Right, I'll go through the list again. Caleb Downs is my top safety. He's 7 on my big board out of Ohio State. Emmanuel McNeil Warren out of small school Toledo is my second safety, and he's 21 on my big board. Dylan Thieneman of Oregon is at 29 on the big board. Now, I'm just going to give you a little bit of warning here because there's some that are being tipped to show up excellent 40 speed. Now, really, once they're tipped to do that, they've got to deliver that. Otherwise, it could cost them on these lists. If they do deliver it, however, it could push them even further up board. So Steeneman's the only safety who's in that category, really. He's likely to be the quickest safety at the combine if he runs a 40. So Thieneman out of Oregon, 29 on my big board, third to safety in this list. Then we get a gap after those three. Those three are all competing to go in round one. And then we might not see any until right at the end of round two. I've got AJ Horsey of LSU at 62 on my big board. Then into round three potential. Kamari Ramsey of USC is at 79. Zaki Wheatley of Penn State's at 85. Genesis Smith of Arizona at 94. Then we're sort of sliding into round four now. Michael Taff of Texas at 119, Bud Clark of TCU at 123. And then we start getting into the later round guys after those nine. There really is a drop off after those nine. Although Louis Moore of Indiana is on the rise at 171. Bishop Fitzgerald of USC 174. Deshaun Ingleton of Nebraska at 180. Jacoby Thomas of Miami at 183, VJ Payne of Kansas State at 184, Jalen Strollman of Notre Dame at 195, Jalen Husky of Maryland at 209, Robert Spears Jennings of Oklahoma at 222, Cole Wisniewski of Texas Tech at 231, Xavier Wankpa of Iowa at 238, Kendall Daniels of Oklahoma State at 239, and the 21st and final one I've got on my list is Isaiah Nwokobia of SMU at 245. Like inside linebacker, safeties do not generally go early in round one unless they're exceptional, but that is another trend that may not be followed here. Downs is another of the elite talents in this draft. McNeil, Warren, and Thieneman are also worthy of round one consideration, although Thieneman's going to need to deliver on that quick 40 time, I think. Whilst Horsey and Ramsey should go on day two, along with one or two more. Kamari Ramsey and Michael Taff are sliding down in terms of their draft stock, so they need to address that if they can at the combine. Those between 12 and 15, so they were well, I'll include Louis Moore in that as well, but Deshaun Singleton, Jacoby Thomas, VJ Payne, Jolyn Stroman, they're all on the rise. But as I say, what will the combine tell us about those six that are needing to, increase their stature or address a slide, and others, what can they do to boost their stock in the combine? Well, I'll update you in a couple of weeks. So finally, then the day two positions that we look at are cornerbacks. And again, here comes a list, and this is a long list at cornerback, 31 here. So I'm not going to tell you the order they come in terms of cornerback rankings because it is the list that I read them out in, but with their big board positions. Mansour Delaney, LSU at 10, Jermichael McCoy of Tennessee at 13, Avion Terrell of Clemson is at 20. Now he's the first one who's reported to be tuned up to run a fast 40 at the combine. So watch for that. I'll tell you the others as I go through. Colton Hood of Tennessee at 24. Brandon Cece of South Carolina at 37 is another potential speedster, as is D'Angelo Pons of Indiana at 50. Chris Johnson of San Diego is at 51. He's not in the speedy class of the others. But Keith Abney of Arizona State at 55 is. Keontae Scott of Miami is at 57 on my big board. Davison Igbonison of State at 71. Malik Muhammad of Texas at 73. Julian Neal, Arkansas Razorback at 81. Florida's Devin Moore is at 73. Jalen Kilgore from South Carolina at 99. Duke's Chandler Rivers is at 107. Texas A&M Aggie Will Lee the third is at 108. Then we've got another speedy guy, Dalen Everett, Georgia at 114. Traden Stooks of Arizona at 116. Then another speedster, Damani Jackson, Alabama at 132. Takario Davis of Arizona at 139. Ezekiel Masses of California at 148. Bryce Butcher of Oregon at 160. Colin Wright of Stanford at 175. The wonderfully named Ephesians Prysock of Washington at 188. TJ Hall of Iowa at 193. Thaddeus Dixon of North Carolina at 198. Charles Demings from lowly Stephen F. Austin at 201. Jaden Kennedy of Oregon at 211. Devon Marshall of NC State at 225. Toriano Pride Jr. from Mizzou at 234. And finally, the second California guy in the cornerback listings, Brent Austin at 243. So this is another class of 3 or 4 round one prospects. If they if they all go early, that could encourage teams late in round one to take one of the others as the next best option before supply runs out. Five in each of rounds two and three, or maybe even more than that, could make it a busy day too for cornerbacks. In terms of who's on the rise, Devin Moore and Trendon Stooks are probably the two that stand out, whilst Justin Neal is struggling to maintain his position right now. So those are the ones to keep an eye on at the combine, depending what they do. So that's my day two preview of the combine done and dusted. I'll come back tomorrow and I'll try and fit in another few state of the franchise addresses and also look at day three of the combine. Excuse me while I reach for my notepad. Day three is going to see the big profile, high profile positions of quarterback, wide receiver, and running back in action. So I'll give you a heads up on who to look for in those categories ahead of that day as well. So take care, and I'll see you soon.